Hello, my name's Michael Wilson and I'm the artist who painted the pictures in this exhibition at the Portico Gallery in West Norwood, London. And there are about 60 pictures in this work, very diverse, covering about the last 10 years of my life. Quite a lot of what I do derives from stories and myths, and they allow, when I'm painting something like this, it allows me to use my imagination to move away from observation and to paint from memory and to really use the paint in as an expressive way as I can. The subject becomes a kind of pretext for my own exploration of paint and subject matter. In this case, it's the story of Oedipus in 5 parts, from him seeing the Sphinx, the encounter with his father and the killing of his father, the marrying of his mother, the discovery of what he's done, and then finally his blindness. I've painted the picture from what I know rather than from what I observe. And here I'm hovering in an impossible position above the roof, looking down into the farmyard where there are children playing. This kind of view is something which I'm very drawn to because it gives me the possibility of creating a sort of composite landscape of different parts, where showing much more than would be possible in reality. At the same time, also, it's a way by not being so attached to what I observe, I'm freer to use paint in an expressive way. And here I've been, again, as free as I could in terms of colour and brushwork. All the paintings in this room are on the subject of Winterreise, a song cycle by Schubert. There are 24 songs in this, in Schubert's song cycle, and I decided to paint a series of pictures, of 24 pictures, one for each of the songs, and most of them are on display here. The song cycle is based on poems by a German poet, Wilhelm Müller, and they tell the story of a man who's forsaken in love, wandering in a winter landscape, regretting what's happened. His mood alternates between despair, hope, and he looks back to his happier days, but also is constantly drawn by fears of death and despair. So it was a very challenging subject, but one that I intrinsically found interesting. But also, by choosing to respond to music and poetry in this way, it allowed me scope to use my own imagination and to invent the scenes as I saw them for each of the poems. The poems are full of nature imagery, so they lend themselves very much to painting, but they're also about inner states of mind. So if you look at some of these pictures, this wall, for example, there's one very obvious one here called A Stormy Morning, where he sees his own mood reflected in the ragged clouds at dawn. And so I've sort of morphed his face actually into the landscape. In this one, he comes, the solitary figure, which sort of is a feature in most of these pictures. He returns to the house where his former loved one lives, and where there's joy and light and partying within, from which he is excluded, and where the house takes on, for me, the face, the persona of the woman, and actually has her eyes staring at him. Down here, this one is A Last Hope. The subject of this is about autumn, and as the leaves fall from the trees, his hopes fall too. So the last leaf to fall is like the last vestige of hope that he has, that his life will go well, and he abandons himself to despair. But for me, it gave the opportunity for this rather formalised, symbolic landscape of autumn, of this golden field of leaves, and the dark figure in the foreground at the grave of his own hopes. There's one here where the same solitary figure is chased from town by a flock of crows. And what these paintings and what these subjects allowed me to do is to experiment with dramatic compositions here, flattening the whole picture plane and creating these rows of houses with no depth, and just the contrast between the snow and the colours of the buildings and the very stark abstract forms of the crows. The paintings on this wall show another side of my work altogether. I've always liked painting landscapes. It's always been an aspect of my work. But in the last few years, last couple of years really, I've been discovering the landscape of East Sussex, down near the coast, near Hastings, and walking there a great deal and exploring there. And these pictures show the results of that exploration really. They vary, they range really from some which are very closely based on observation of real places, this being a case in point. A field near the Fire Hills at Hastings on a brilliant summer's day, I call it Halcyon Day, where I wanted to capture that intense contrast between light and shade, and particularly the way the sky seems to shimmer on such days, and that where it meets the landscape, there is a strange kind of tension set up between, which it seems to give off a pinkish aura, which is how I've painted it, and which I think helps to capture that light. But it's in many ways quite a conventional sort of composition, I mean, one that I was very attracted to for its simplicity. Whereas a picture like this is rather different. It's painted much more from memory than from actual close observation. It's a place that I know, and it's very much about moving into the landscape. These landscapes, one of the things that attracts me is the sense of movement and always the mystery of what lies beyond, in the distance or even outside the picture frame. And here I've included some figures to give a sense of the walking in the landscape, and the fences and the gates form kind of successive phases in that journey, and the trees themselves frame and screen what lies beyond. It's a sort of winter landscape, but one that's still full of life and vitality. I mean, this landscape for me is particularly fecund and full of richness. Especially you can see in this one, which is a hayfield in summer, where the whole thing is brimming with light. In the distance, there's light glinting on the patch of sea, which you can just glimpse. But where, again, as in the previous picture, the eye's drawn into the distance and into these misty, rich, wooded hills, where one wonders what one will discover. And here, again, a picture much more from imagination, but of the same landscape, where I'm sort of taking an aerial view over the landscape, and where the trees are heavy with foliage and form these great mountains or mounds of green, rich, full shapes, ripe shapes against the swelling of the hills. It's all those sort of shapes that really seem to me to capture the feeling of this particular landscape.